This is Ezekiel Drews, host of Podcast, A Star Wars Story. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey, it's Baxter Colburn here from Public House Media. Did you know that we just added a store here at Public House Media? No, I'm not talking about a grocery store where you can go buy apples or bananas or peanut butter, which are all fantastic, especially when peanut butter's on all of those. Anyway, we've added a store here at Public House Media so you can not only come and represent your favorite podcast network, but also represent your favorite shows as well, too. Just go over to thephmedia.com and look in the top right corner where you'll see the button that says Store. Click on that and you can search through all of our great products. Or if you go to our Facebook page, Public House Media, you can see on the left-hand side a tab that says Store. All of our products are listed there as well too. It's the new Public House Media store. You don't want to miss it. It is fantastic. Buy some of that great swag to support your favorite shows and to support Public House Media. Check it out today.
What's up, everybody? This is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Press Row, where we talk about the biggest issues in sports with the analysts, experts, and reporters who cover them. No nonsense, hard-hitting interviews on the sports topics you're talking about. A new show comes out every single Thursday. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Press Row. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey everybody, welcome to Beauties and Headcanons, where we're nerdy and you probably are too. This is Emily and I'm here today with Lindsay and we're here to talk nerdy to you about Disney and Pixar movies. It's pretty awesome. We've got a few movies to talk about here, and as you can tell by the title of this episode, we're going to be talking about feelings. Aww. And the way that Disney and Pixar and the Disney Pixar movies kind of approach emotion and human issues, even getting into a little bit of mental illness here and there too. Disney and Pixar use a lot of personification when they take human characteristics and they place them into cars or toys or animals, or even splitting up human emotions into different characters in the movie. And it helps us as viewers to remove the person from the characteristic so that we can actually see what it looks like. And it isolates those characteristics to see how others interact with that characteristic and make it easier for us to understand. So we're going to get into some different movies that we found to have really interesting relationships between those characteristics and our personal reactions to those. So let's go ahead and get started. The first one I have, I'm really conflicted about this movie, Wally, because the first time I saw it, I loved it. It was super good. And now the more that I see it, it just makes me so sad for what happens to the humans. It just does.
Yeah, well, and the thing about that movie too is like it's both like it's a warning, and the very end is very hopeful as well, because
yes.
If you don't remember, at the end of that movie, they do overcome what's happened to them and start to plant and start to rehabilitate the planets, and they start to overcome those things too. So even though this terrible muscle and boning type of thing happens to them, even though that happens, they do start to get stronger at the end, and they start to plant again, and they start to realize that they had been lied to about.
That's true. That is true.
What the future
if a company
really was.
pops up called By and Large, just don't.
don't buy. And
there was a movie about that.
Large.
Exactly.
This is both a warning and yes.
And
so we did talk a little bit about how Wally was definitely a robot of habit. In the beginning of the movie, he is still doing his job of cleaning up the Earth. And he's the only working robot that we see doing that job of compacting and piling up the trash. But we did also see an extra characteristic of him, too. He has this carousel in his little hangar there where he is categorizing and chronicling all of the little trinkets and cute little things that he gets.
Yeah.
And that he finds.
Which is not part of his actual programming.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we are seeing a very almost kind of like OCD characteristic to him, where he's very particular about where things go, and he knows exactly where they go too. And I can't imagine that that's something that was programmed into him
no, exactly.
from the get-go.
Yeah, and I wonder where this obsessive-compulsive thing came from, because I wonder if he was this way before all of the other Wally robots went inactive, or if it became a thing afterward to kind of occupy himself, or he became that way, like, over time just because that's what happens to his program? I don't know.
I would almost kind of say that it had to be afterwards, like kind of like a coping mechanism.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Because he finds those trinkets and things, and I can't imagine that when every robot was out there cleaning up and compiling everything, that it was possible for him to stop and to see those things and to put them in his lunchbox.
Yeah,
so I feel like
I think the carousel that he stores all of his stuff in, I think that was originally designed to store Wally's in. Because remember, one of them is where he like sleeps or whatever at night.
Yep.
And so I'm pretty sure all of that used to be full of Wally's. So I think you're right that it would have been after, where he started compiling all of his collectibles and such.
Sure, that makes sense. And you know, we obviously see that the Earth has turned into this kind of like decline of everything. There's got to be a mental decline, obviously, of the humans, because they don't even think for themselves any longer, and obviously the physical decline of them, and the social decline too, because they are constantly bombarded by their ads and the shows that they're watching, and they don't even look beyond those to see everyone else floating around next to them too. So it's a decline of everything that makes us human.
Right, exactly. And the humans in Wally basically became victims of their surroundings rather than controllers of them.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So, but what I found interesting about Wally, as I thought more about his character, is like he does have the obsessive compulsive, organizing all of his stuff. And one of my favorite parts is where he finds a spork and he doesn't know if he should put it with the forks or the spoons. So he just well, I'll start a new category. But then he's always got Hello Dolly going in the background, and maybe that's his way of learning about humans. Because, he tries to, like, dance like them, and then he became a little bit obsessive about how the two main, male and female characters in the movie held hands, and he became a little obsessive about that, too. But he had nobody to hold hands with.
He didn't even really have romanticness. Hands, but, he was so romantic.
It's cute.
But he also he ends his OCD about his doing his job and chronicling all of his things when he's following Eve around after she gets the plant and is harboring it waiting to be picked up, because she's completely shut off to preserve the plant, and he's trying to hold her hand, like you said. But he like wrap her in Christmas lights, and
he takes care of her. He puts up an umbrella when it's storming for her, and he makes sure that she gets a charge when it's sunshiny out and that sort of thing. I think she needs maybe she doesn't. He needs the charge from the sun, but anyways,
right.
But like he takes care of her and makes sure that nothing bad happens to her, and that kind of becomes his new objective, because he stops collecting trash throughout the day anymore. That he completely forgets his original programming. So
I think that's like my favorite part about that movie,
right? Isn't it? It's almost
this robot
like,
with these.
Like it's almost like he gets released from his programming when he meets her. And then suddenly he becomes his own
And that's when she falls
robot.
into her programming. Yeah,
right.
Because she goes into her directive. Oh.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so then he chases her back to the Axiom. And so they're trying to work together to make sure that the humans get the plant and do what they're supposed to with it and everything. But yeah, so at the very beginning, Wally was so obsessive compulsive though. So that was, I thought, an interesting take on that disorder, and also on how it can change at the drop of a hat too.
Right.
So I guess, yeah, so the next movie that I want to mention is Inside Out. And this one is one of my favorite movies ever of all time. Partly because the movie itself is about a girl going through a major transition in her life, and that transition happens to be moving across the country, which I did several times throughout my life. I lived in over 10 houses before I got to college. So I moved around quite a bit. And then after, so I had to learn how to transition when I was very young. The first time I moved, I was 4 years old. And so I didn't really understand what was going on. But then, as I got older, like, one of the more recent times I had moved, I was in 8th grade, about to go into high school, and I was so sad that we were going to be moving to a different state, because I had friends from 8th grade that were going to be at the high school I was going to go to, and I didn't want to leave those friends behind and go to a high school that I knew 0 people at. Mm-hmm. And so that was a big transition for me, and then I finally, I figured it out. I came to terms with the transition. And so Inside Out really helped me understand what I went through, and maybe helped me think about how I changed during all those transitions. I love the way it takes each of those emotions, and it shows not only Riley in the movie what happens when some of your emotions shut down and you're only left with the rest of them, but also how you need to have complex emotions in order to process events that happen in your life. Otherwise, you make really poor decisions.
Right. And it's really cool how, it takes those different emotions, and they're extremely exaggerated in the movie too. Disgust and anger and fear, and it really has these rudimentary aspects, and none of us are made up of just those emotions. You can be angry and also other things at the same time, or certain events in your life can make you feel happy but also sad at any given point, depending on how that memory impacts you and how it gets developed and ends in that moment. But it's really cool how when all of those different emotions are separated from each other, they're exaggerated, but they're also very real. There's when you're younger, or I imagine, I don't remember being that young, but I have raised a daughter, and those different emotions, she could go through them in really quick succession. And I've seen babies, toddlers, young people go through that. But it's also very true that now that she's 10, she has much more complex emotions, where she can still be happy about something happening, but there's also a certain sadness of loss, or of some kind of different development. My daughter has also had to move a couple of times. We've done a couple different schools just here in Milwaukee, and making new friends and having to go through those transitions. There are different emotions attached to that, and how they're processed is very different depending on the age. She at some point had to say, okay, I don't want to be in this school anymore because of the bullying, and I don't want to do this anymore. But that kind of feeling is a little bit different than where she's at now, where it has to be more about the learning and not so much about the social aspect of school. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that Riley goes through the making new friends and the memories that she's dealing with of her old home and her old friends, and that it's okay to have to try and make new ones too. And it's also okay to have negative emotions. You don't always have to be happy. You don't always have to be in charge of those things, because we are humans. We are emotional beings, and she has moments where she isn't in control of those things, and that inner turmoil that is chronicled in the movie is really the big struggle of adolescence and becoming from becoming a child to a young person to a young adult. I suppose she doesn't really get to that point in the
she's
the movie,
she's at the early adolescent stage.
Yeah,
you know?
But even that transition into those more complex emotions, and to know that those more complex emotions are okay, that's really important in that movie. And dealing with going from the simpler to the more complex, and then how the memories are the little swirly balls that have two emotions in them.
I loved that.
And how the different memory lands, I don't remember what they're called.
The islands of personality.
Yes, the islands of personality change as she grows older too. And
they get more complex,
really cool.
And there's more of them.
There's more of them, they're more complex, and they're not necessarily just fun little happy places. They're much more important to who she is as a person.
Yeah. What I thought was interesting too with the different emotions is, as Joy at the beginning was trying to relate to the audience what each emotion was for, she got to sadness and she's like, not really sure what sadness is for. And so, like, Joy, as the, like, head emotion, it seemed like, didn't really know what to do with sadness. So she just always tried to shove sadness to the side. And it kind of came out in, after Riley moved, that Riley didn't know how to deal with sadness.
Right, exactly.
And so if you continually shove emotions into the corner, you're not going to understand how to deal with those emotions, and then you're going to end up making poor decisions or end up reacting in ways that you don't intend or you don't understand. You know, and so then in the movie, Riley decided that running away was the best idea because she had to go make more happy memories. Well, there's plenty of happy memories to be made in a new place. It's just you need to actually accept what you're really feeling and then move on from it and figure out how to continue where you're at.
Right, and how to go forward from going from where you've been to where you're going.
Exactly.
That being said, the next one was Finding Nemo. You know, we can talk about how Dory is always swimming. Keep on swimming. Keep on swimming.
Yes, just keep swimming. Just keep swimming.
She suffers from what we assume to be like an unstated amnesiac type of syndrome, where she's got
she calls it short-term memory loss.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
For Finding Dory, I always thought short-term memory loss.
That's what she always called it.
Right, and then it's really interesting because she loses her way so much in the movie, and despite this, though, she is always striving forward in her life. She's always trying to make new friends and trying to help others. Even though she might not be the most helpful, she still wants to.
Right.
And she does actually help end up getting Marlon and Nemo back together. So, you know, that overcoming of her challenges is really important to her character. I don't know, I feel like having memory problems and overcoming them is really important.
Like learning how to, what the issue is, and then how to connect the dots from point A to point B to point C and so forth. You know, I think, especially with a memory problem like that. Like, personally, I don't have memory issues unless I'm, have prego brain or I was trying to do too many things all at once, but I don't have a chronic issue like that.
Right.
But just looking at it from Dory's perspective is really interesting.
Well, and it's funny because, I my daughter has ADHD, so she's very fidgety, and I've been told that I probably did when I was growing up. But I just learned how to get through high school, to get through those things. But I do know now in college that I need to learn science concepts differently. So I feel like that concept, knowing that you have to do different things in order to learn something and to learn something efficiently, is kind of part of the overcoming your own obstacles, and knowing that you can triumph if you work hard enough, or if you know yourself well enough. If you know what you need to overcome, you're able to overcome it better. If you don't face it and you don't know those things about yourself, or if you hide them from yourself, that's where the real issues come in.
Yeah.
Marlon also kind of seems to have like a little bit of PTSD. He's absolutely petrified of never finding Nemo again.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't he like lose his wife in the movie?
Yeah, the beginning of the movie. Yeah, the beginning of the movie shows just Marlon and his wife. I think Coral was her name.
Yeah, I think so.
And they had just gotten their first home together in their anemone, and they had a whole batch of eggs laid and fertilized, ready to hatch in a few days. And a barracuda comes, and Coral tries to protect all the eggs, and in doing so gets basically all the eggs and herself eaten by the barracuda. And so Marlon tried to stop her, but couldn't, and the only egg that survived was Nemo. And so from that whole scenario, Marlon was just very, very traumatized and caused him to be super, super protective of Nemo, because it's basically all he has left of his wife and of the rest of his possible children, you know, because there were hundreds of eggs that were there ready to be hatched, and he could have had, you know, such a huge, wonderful family and barracuda. So, like, from one perspective, I can definitely understand his fear, but then he's not actually processing it fully. He's just letting his fear control him instead of him controlling his fear.
Yes. And so at the end of the movie, he has to kind of come to terms with that loss and learn to compromise with Nemo, because Nemo's just had this paramount life experience. And he has to, like, kind of give him a little bit more age-appropriate freedom in the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And then Finding Dory takes on a different storyline too, where we learn a lot more about her family and what she's had to do. And that's another Pixar movie where fish have human qualities. And I have to admit, I've seen it, but I'm sure I haven't seen either of those movies as often as you have, because my daughter's a lot older than you are.
Yeah, I've seen them several times. My daughter's 3, almost 4. By the time this episode comes out, she'll be 4, because it's her birthday in a couple days from this recording. Yeah. So she loves Finding Dory, and what happens in that one is, we're addressing Dory's situation specifically, but we're also seeing how Marlon is letting his fear again of losing Dory control him. And he doesn't want Dory to, get lost or to forget. And so he limits her. He places limits on Dory and says, you can't do it because you're going to forget about it. But she has confidence in herself, which is amazing. And that's awesome, because she's totally, she's lived her whole life, remembering half of what she actually does, and she has like very fuzzy memories about her parents, and they go through flashbacks throughout the movie of what she does remember and what she had forgotten that she knows. That little song, Just Keep Swimming, her parents sang to her, and so she was trying to remember where her parents were, where she used to live, and any hint or clue to help her find where her parents were. That was the whole premise, is that Dory is not only like trying to find her parents, but she's trying to at the same time then find out who she is, because she doesn't really remember a lot of her life. So there's that. There's other characters as well that basically the Dory came from a fish rehabilitation center, and so there's this negative Nelly octopus that we run into named Hank, and he's just great. He's like he's like the grumpy guy that doesn't want to have any friends, but he ends up making friends anyways. Because Dory's just always just super bubbly, positive, everything all the time. And then
contagious.
It totally is. And then there's this beluga whale who's his sonar doesn't work properly, or whatever his so the world's most powerful pair of glasses is what it's called in the movie, and that doesn't work properly, but it does, and so he doesn't think it does until he tries it again. There's a whale shark who is nearsighted, so she can't see anything until she runs into the wall, and they had to remind her, if she gets released into the ocean, there's no walls in the ocean. So, so it's all of these different characters in Finding Dory that, each of them have their own issues, but it's a matter of them figuring out how to cope with those issues and be able to live in the wild again.
Right. So let's talk about Up a little bit. This one is my personal favorite movie. But I cry a lot during it. It gives me...
How could you not?
Not to be funny, but it gives me all the feels.
Yes.
So what we see in Up is, it's not as explicitly stated as something like Inside Out was, but Up shows basically like the effects of grief on someone, not only with Mr. Fredricksen, but also with his wife when she loses her child, when they're getting ready for the baby. I cry like a baby during that scene, because I've never had a miscarriage or lost a child, but I know many people who have, and
me too.
Just the absolute having your body fail you in that kind of way is something that I can't even imagine.
I can't imagine either. I don't know how. I know people, family members and coworkers, and I just sympathy. I can just extend my sympathy, but I can't extend the empathy because I don't know.
Well, and the way she's sitting in that chair in that scene where she's just looking up and she's
letting the sun shine on her face like that. Yeah.
But she does pass away, and we don't know exactly what happens. Hopefully, it was just old age, but Mr. Fredricksen is left alone, and it kind of gives us this other perspective when we first meet him, where he's the stereotypical grumpy old man, but obviously we have the backstory, so we know why he's grumpy, and we see it as the audience, but no one else knows that. And especially those awful guys that are trying to tear down his house.
Right,
And the guys from the nursing home that are going to come take him away after that incident with the suit that's there. And then, we've got Russell, who looks past this behavior and accepts him and wants to be his friend and hitches a ride on the house.
It's just hilarious because he totally did it by accident. Of course.
Oh, and he's so petrified when he's up there, but so he ends up bonding with him, and they kind of overcome issues together. Russell's absolutely petrified, and Mr. Fredricksen makes him kind of come out of his shell, and really Russell kind of helps Mr. Fredricksen overcome a few of those issues, and then overcomes those issues himself. We see him on the porch. He accidentally went on a ride with Mr. Fredricksen, and the things that they have to do to try and get the house to that exact spot on top of the falls.
Oh yeah. They go through that whole adventure, and Mr. Fredricksen, never having had kids himself, probably is like, what in the world, why is this kid talking so much or asking so many questions, blah, blah, blah. And Russell's like, wow, somebody to actually like talk to, and I can ask him questions of. He's old, he probably knows a lot of stuff,
And Russell is kind of like the perfect combination of his wife and him too. This kind of pudgy, weird little dude, but also with the best optimism and excitement for life that his wife had too. Yeah. So just a really cool combination of the two of them. So if they had a kid,
it could have been a lot like Russell,
it probably could have been a lot like Russell.
Yeah.
And then, it really just shows that like empathy and acceptance really are some of the best things to have in your toolkit when it comes to grief, depression, mental health issues. And it's really, Russell, he comes from a different kind of family dynamic, and Mr. Fredricksen sort of takes on kind of like a grandpa role. Russell's family, I think his mom and dad are separated. Dad lives with or is married to another person. We don't really see very much of what's going on for him, but we do know that he's kind of left to his own devices a lot. Yeah. And he has to deal with that. And Mr. Fredricksen then at the very end of the movie is there for him when he gets his
badges.
His badges. He gets his.
What kind of scout were they? Wilderness explorers. Mm-hmm.
Yes, wilderness explorers. So he's there for that final ceremony, and he was kind of like the facilitator of that. He was supposed to help an elderly man, but he did much more than that in the end of the movie. So I wanted to talk about, obviously, that those aren't just the only Pixar movies or Disney Pixar movies that are really important in the Pixar lineup. There's obviously Cars and Toy Story, and who doesn't love Toy Story?
All three of them. So good.
And, we could have marathons of the trilogies of some of these, but we really wanted to talk about the ones that we felt kind of took the parts of our feelings and gave them to our children and tried to make sense of them and to help our children make sense of them, but then to also help us make sense of making sense of our children to us as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we thank you for getting nerdy with us today. We want you to talk nerdy to us. Our question today is, what Disney Pixar movie gave you all of the feels? And what did you relate to about it? Let us know. Find Beauties and Headcanons on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr to share your nerdy topic suggestions. We'd love to know what you'd like to hear from us. Subscribe to this podcast and others from Public House Media on iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and wherever good podcasts are found. We love feedback, so if you liked this episode, or even if you didn't, or if you've got ideas for us, please let us know. Give us a rating and a review so that we can keep making great episodes for you. I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Emily. And thanks for getting nerdy with us on Beauties and Headcanons.